Okay. Well, thanks to all of you for showing up and participating in this. I consider it more an interactive, dynamic thing that we're on a kind of like on a journey together. And the questions you ask and the comments you make often help me, probably a lot more than what I say helps you. And so that's my benefit, and I'm very grateful for that. But grateful that people participate and share in the experience. And to start with, I'd like to do the brief meditation again. And this is just to kind of calm the mind, calm the heart, slow the breathing process, center a little bit so that it makes it easier to unfold, or to, go into the oneness with a receptive nature, a receptive heart, a receptive mind, so that you can hopefully get a deeper understanding of the things that we're talking about, rather than just a surface type understanding. So to start with, let's take our concentration to the top of the head and focus there. And try to feel or become aware of the life force. It flows into us constantly, and it flows out. The normal cycle in full intensity is a 24-hour cycle. It's our circadian rhythm. It's based on our complete physiology, our expression of consciousness. And then if you know what the Kriya Pranayama is, I encourage people to do anywhere from 3 to 10 or 12, just to center that, speeds that whole process up, and you move more quickly through the evolutionary process, the evolutionary time. So either hold your concentration at the top of the head and breathe. Monitor your breath, breathing in, breathing out, or run the Kriya Pranayama and bring further balance to your body. And I always, in surrendering, offer gratitude to the teaching, to the teachers, the lineage, the lines that I have been instructed in. Grateful for that knowledge, grateful for that awareness, grateful for the energy. And asking the divine to help me understand the teaching better, apply it to my own life, and to develop the ability and the skills to share that with others. And I like to always be mindful that as consciousness expresses, it expresses as all beings of the same type, of the same stuff, of the same awareness. Sometimes when people touch that source, they realize there's really only one being, one awareness, expressing in lots of different ways. Or there's one God, one form, expressing in lots of different ways. And as it expresses, we tend to identify with parts of it and think that's me or that's mine. And when we do that and let go of that sense of oneness, we come into the world and we experience and we learn and we grow. And this is a world that we come in to learn about the flow of energy, to learn about the method of processing of information, of thought, of how the expression, how the creation manifests, how it's here and how we can participate and share with it. And then slowly open eyes and come back into the physical or gross consciousness. And with a clear mind and a clear heart, we'll begin to consider the topics of initiation and enlightenment. And there's lots of symbols that are thrown out that can be very helpful. Some of them I find are just useful for concentration, like the image on the screen. And it can help me to see that I'm a part of that divine expression. And then I always come back to the base knowledge and try to go through this because there's new people, but also to remind myself and to help understand. But for me, what I learned most from Audley was to validate the path of meditation. And when I look back through all the teachings of Dr. Thin, his guru and teacher, and Roy Davis and his lineage through the Kriya lines and all of those, I see that they all talk about it being a scientific process or teaching of meditation and how it works. And it's just like if I'm understanding scientific information, I try to understand what the information is, and often will sit in lectures, take notes, read books, take notes, apply it. I like doing experiments. If I can set up an experiment where I can test the information, does it work? Is it accurate? Is it clear? And sometimes it works, but it's not very accurate or it's not very clear. So I try to refine that and correct information if there's errors. And I realized in time that there's a lot of concepts that get brought into it, and even language and the culture and all sorts of things. And sometimes it goes off a kind of a strange direction, and you try to bring it back to where it maybe provides a more clear instruction, and then refine and improve the descriptions and the language, make the language current. Language is dynamic, constantly evolving, constantly growing. Even the structure and grammar and how we talk and how we express, that's constantly changing. So, and you can see that within a lifetime. If you go back and look at the spiritual books that were written in the first 50 years of the 20th century, that's when people like Yogananda and Dr. Thin and Swami Vivekananda, a lot of those teachers were coming to the West. And it was some of the first time that a lot of the information had been translated into English. And as it turns out, I know a lecture I was listening to the other day, it said that Sanskrit was really a language that was designed to talk about all these things about the subtle realms and the very fine distinctions in the mind. And English is very poor at that. So trying to translate those things into English often introduces confusion, and especially the first few generations of translations. You know, they didn't have full mastery. They translated it or transcribed it word for word, more or less, and it gives you kind of a different perspective. But as you get better at it and as you experience it yourself, then you're able to add to it or to refine it or polish it a little bit. Maybe find a better metaphor, a better analogy. And always throughout time, the metaphors and the analogies, they always say, well, it's like this, or it's kind of like that, or different things. And those metaphors change with time. You know, at one point, it was talking about programming and affirmations and that, and repeating things over and over. And then it became more of a description that was kind of like how a computer works. And then it was more of an explanation, and says it's kind of like how quantum mechanics works. And I think that's a little bit of a stretch, but always the people that are interested in the spiritual effort or the spiritual knowledge, the spiritual investigations, they always seem to end up with the most current analogies and say, oh, it's like this. They try to explain it in better terms. And so they use the current scientific, current linguistic and religious terms and try to make it as clear as possible, make it accurate, continue to do diagrams and tables, maps and things. And I find that some of them, I see it differently. Maybe when I experience it inside, than maybe what Audley drew on. And I realize I'm dealing with issues like the limitation of what you can actually draw. You know, you see an inner dimension that's multiple dimensions, and then you try to do it in a drawing or represent it in some way, and you have a two-dimensional piece of paper that you can do it on, and you can't really do three-dimensional items on that, or you can't do higher dimensional items that show dimensions folded in on it. You can, about the best we can do as humans is we can explain those mathematically. And you can find some very interesting, information and perspectives from just doing the mathematics and describing it. But all of it, trying to validate the path, make it real for you. That was the most important thing. And use examples that, support it, especially for meditation. And there's lots of ways to go deeper. And then the states of consciousness, I like to keep going back to it for many reasons. First of all, in waking consciousness, the gross realm, what we generally know as ego or personality, we all experience that. But everybody, when you show up in the world, when you're born, we all show up with these same basic states of consciousness. Even babies have waking and sleep consciousness. It appears they dream. And you don't need any special knowledge or special skills. These are some of the things that are just built into us as what we are as a human or as a person. And those waking, dreaming, and sleep states, they're with you every day. And they're the expression of the divine. And it expresses in a different level or a different way. And then when you get to that fourth state, Turiya, the pure awareness, no matter what happens, you're waking, you think, I'm awake, and I'm doing a lecture. I'm in Oklahoma, or I'm in Texas, or I'm in California, or God knows where on this world. I'm somewhere here, and I'm aware of it. I know, I have a strong sense that I'm sitting in California right now, and in a waking consciousness. But what part of me is it that, when you peel that back a little bit, why is it that I think I'm here? What is it and that comes into that Turiya, that pure awareness. No matter what state of consciousness I'm in, or I'm awake, I have thoughts about that and awareness about it. In dreaming, I have experiences there, and there may be any number of levels or distinctions in the mind or in the etheric or the astral levels, but I'm still aware that I'm there. And then even in deep sleep, if you shake me hard and wake me up, or the phone rings and pulls me out of it, and I think, who would be calling at this hour? But then I know I was asleep. And often in my voice, when somebody calls like that, it may sound like I'm a little drowsy or groggy, and they say, were you asleep? And I say, yeah, I was. It's 2:30 in the morning here. Oh my God, I'm on the other side of the world. I thought it was, it's all that kind of stuff. But we all go through those expressions, but we know that we're having that experience. And so everybody that's listening to this, and everybody that's that's ever thought about this kind of stuff, they all have these experiences. It's our common basis of what we are as a human being, or as an expression of the divine. And so we wake, we dream, we sleep, we have that awareness that we are. And then when we merge into that oneness, the Turiyatita, the fifth state, then everything arises from there. And you can have a subtle or an awareness in that level of being all things, but that's the extent of it. There's no objects, there's nothing. It's just like everything. And the best thing that I've found that describes it is it's a blissful situation, close to the oneness. And then here's the drawings, and I won't dwell on these. I've talked about them, but the maps or the drawings that that Audley gave us, and there's lots of different ways to talk about them and to share them, and they often add I guess clarity to what it is and to how we're trying to do it. And sometimes there's various ways to look at it that may be more insightful than others, and so we do our best to try to understand those. And the thing I like to kind of reinforce is that the causal level, or the God self, the Godhead, the Great Supreme, the Oversoul, for me, all those, that's a single experience, just different layers and different, I guess, levels within that in how it expresses. But they're not form. If I'm like the rules I've tried to, kind of rules of thumb that I've tried to share is that, if you're seeing form or you're seeing things and you're seeing objects, you're not in the causal, you're not in that Godhead awareness. You're in some other manifestation of mind where forms still exist. And all of the subtle realms, the subtle levels, those are all of the various things that have things that we see. We can exist there. We have subtle bodies, there's subtle sounds, the sound current. It all is an expression in that level. And in the gross physical world, we generally don't get too confused about we're in our body, we're in that, but we often hear people that feel out of sorts and they say, I'm out of my body, or I've had a dream that was like an out of body experience, or various things. But there's different components of us, but when we are having those, we're no longer identified with the gross physical, we're in the subtle realms. And then if we go beyond that, beyond all objects, beyond duality, we're in the causal, and we experience the oneness. And then those sheaths that or forms, koshas, various things, the bliss first experience coming out of that oneness is that feeling that of great love, of great care for all existence. And it's so strong. The only words I can find to describe what comes out of that is out of the oneness is that the oneness, or the source, has a desire to know itself, and that manifests as this world. And it wants to know itself because it loves, it cares, it builds into itself. And so that it ends up being the bliss, or the real oneness. And then the intelligence, that's the high mind. And that one is the mind that can discriminate. It can know right from wrong, truth from falsehood. And then the mind sheath, what we normally think of as our brain or our mind, is really an organ of thought. It perceives thoughts in the same way that our eyes perceive objects, or our ears perceive sounds, or the nose perceives the smell, or the body the sensation of touch. So it's important. And then the physical sheath, it's called the flesh body, the gross realm, physical world. It's the one that sweats and smells bad if it's not cleaned properly. And then the planes of existence, won't dwell on those, but the biggest thing is that we're all there, and we're all just alike. We're all just this little spark, or this little flame that's an expression of the one looking at itself. And when we look at others, if you can look into the heart, or into the source of their being, you find that it's the light, looks just like the light that you find when you look inside yourself. It's the God self, the God awareness. And that exists in all beings. And lots of ways, to look at it, but they're everywhere. And so focus on what you focus on in others is what you experience, and kind of what you are. You can only, Audley often, told me many times, you can only see yourself, and if you look at others and you can see the light, then you're centering in the oneness in your own being. And if you look at others and you can see all their flaws and all their problems, then you're focusing in your own personality, your own sense experience, your own habit, your own nature. And it's hard when you first begin to get past that, to where you can actually start to see the light within yourself, but also to see the light within others. And the instructions that is given in all the traditions is some form of, sit still, calm the mind. Um, when the mind becomes still, that part of the mind or brain that's the sense accumulates or translates the sense perception into our likes and dislikes and things like that. When we get past that, then the thought form's rising. Then we can have a chance to go beyond and to know more of the truth about it. But if we're only identifying with the physical body, we sit down and we say, oh, I didn't see anything in meditation. I didn't experience anything. I didn't feel anything. I didn't hear anything. And it's just like I'm deaf mute, and I'm trying hard, but nothing's happening. I've heard that from many students. And so when you come to that point, that's where a wise teacher provides some instruction, and the instruction teaches you how to still the mind and simply look at the thoughts. And even though people often tell me, I don't see anything, I don't hear anything, I have no inner experience, I can ask them a few questions and they'll tell me what they're seeing, what they're valuing, what they're doing right now. And you can learn a great deal by simply asking questions. But there's lots of candles, lots of lights, they're all around. And then when we talk about initiation, we talk often about sharing the light. And this is kind of a nice little graphic, but it just shows that if one catches on fire, a candle or a match or whatever, and it comes close to others, they will begin to self-ignite. And it's not as though the teacher necessarily had to do something, or there even had to be a teacher. There are certain situations that seem to be possible that there can be set up vibrational wise that will simply cause spontaneous ignition or spontaneous combustion, just getting around or thinking about wanting to know that can have enlightenment, can set it on fire, so to speak. And so you try to keep that part of your consciousness focused and try to stay centered where you can be calm and see what it is. And then one thing we talk about in initiation, and it's hard to find a graphic that represents what might happen as a teacher would initiate you. But in a sense, it's taking a portion of their light that they can often use with their hands and sharing that light with you, or touching that light, that flame from like a candle, touching that to the candle that's within you, or the light that's within you, and helping you to be aware of it. But it is a force that can be felt, it can be seen by some people, and then it can be shared. And so part of what we do in the whole process of meditation is preparing for that lighting of that lamp, or that lighting of that awareness. And it can be very beautiful, and there's lots of stories in all of the traditions and people that have experienced it. They describe it often in the same way, and there's lots of books about it and various things out there. And then if we look at it, like the instruction that's given a lot of times, it all starts with every tradition I know, some form of meditation. And, some of the meditations are very, very different. There's walking meditations. There's probably a swimming meditation for people like Connie. Anything that you do repetitive in motion, it can help still the mind. The mind becomes entrained with that process, and it simply can let go of its attachment to things if you're doing something repetitively. And in the meditation, often there's instruction that's given. It's like, monitor your breath, in, out, in, out. It's given a mantra, do it over and over and over. And any of these things, and there are mudras or forms, symbols that can be formed with the hands and with the body, that actually generate certain configurations of energy. Yoga does this, and some teachers of yoga teach a lot of the mudras, or the way typically when we learn meditation from Audley, the ones that learn there, it was, one of the mudras is the thumb and the forefinger, or the first index finger, placing those together and closing off that circuit of energy. And since these are sense organs, and it takes sensation coming in before it registers, closing those off or shortening those can do it. There's postures that help extenuate or enhance that. And so you can do those and have move more quickly or practice the technique and move deeper into it. And then the concept of initiation itself, it implies a whole lot of assumptions. Like, first is that you're currently in a state of not being initiated, so you're not enlightened, you're not in awareness. Often, if you look at initiation, there's an initiee and an initiator. There's a guru and a student, or there's a master and a beginner. And in all traditions, even in different work environments, there's often apprenticeship programs where you follow the master around, or you follow the one who's more skilled than you are, and you learn and you practice and you develop greater capability in that area. And then as you develop the ability after the initiation, after something has transpired, you come to a state of enlightenment or increased awareness or clarity, and that you understand the source. You understand that you are the source, that you are an expression of that, and things pick up, they get better, you feel happier. But what makes you think that you're not enlightened right now? That's one of the downsides of talking about initiation, is that it builds in the assumption that you're not already there. And which you are. I mean, you're just an expression of the divine. We all look like the same little spark of energy, same little flame, and that exists in us whether or not we're aware of it. And if you start making the differentiation or the duality, or saying, it's I'm here and I'm not there, and I don't have that awareness, and all this, and there may be some reason that drives that. It's our karmic patterns. Maybe you feel that you're not worthy, that you're not pure enough. This is an emblem, or an emblem, not really an emblem, but a symbol that's used in many traditions, or nearly in all traditions. It's just like, the reason that you don't know God and the fullness of the divine is that you're impure. You have impure thoughts, and there's even remediations in a lot of things to get rid of the impurity. And no matter how I look at it, I find that everybody's has the same degree of purity. They're all a little spark, little flame, kind of creatures that expressed from the divine. And they sometimes get a different energy on them, or like putting on different clothes, like different bodies. And sometimes they have darker skin or lighter skin, or darker clothes or lighter clothes, or bright colored ones, or their skin is blue or their skin is golden, different things. But I don't find anyone that's, that when you go past the outer layer of what they are as a person or as an expression, and you look at the core, it's all the same. Everybody's ultra pure, right out of minted from the divine, an expression of the source. And the more they become aware of that, the more they realize they're everything. But a lot of the things, and I talked some last time about the chakras, and how that energy, or that feeling of not being worthy, or not being pure, how it can express through the different levels. And like fear in the root chakra, shame or guilt, grief, lies, the illusions, the attachments to this world. And then there's even some subtle deviations of that, like lust, greed, envy, anger. All these things arise out of these base attachments, or really illusions, in a sense, that we have their incorrect knowledge or incorrect belief. And as the human form, as we come into this life and we express and through our karma and stuff, we all have issues in all the chakras or centers. We have something that we came here and we're trying to learn more about, or to work out the attachment that we had, to try to understand it, to see it better. We may have issues with fear or abandonment. You know, we think we're the only one in the history of the universe who was ever abandoned or ever abused. It's the way the mind is structured, and so we try to work through those and get through the illusion, get through our attachments, and then come to enlightenment to try to understand what that is. This is a little link. I won't play it, but I thought it was very informative, and it's one of the Kriya Yoga teachers in the tradition that we deal with, and I think Brad Keller sent this to me, but because he's speaking about the physical breath for the gross realm, which we do in the pranayams and things, and then the subtle breath, and then the causal breath. And I'd encourage you to follow some of his teaching. He's one of the better teachers out there, and has a great sense of humor, and also a great insight into the self. And then there's metaphors, symbols, and stories that are all tied to these things, initiations and enlightenment. And we've got models or metaphors. We think it's like this, it's like this, it's like this, but it's really as the ones that go into the source, the deepest, they tell us it's not this, not this. You know, it's not anything that we can identify with. So all the symbols and the stories and the metaphors, they can be signposts. They can point the way, and hopefully a way that can help you understand, or help you to be motivated to go deeper into your own awareness, your own consciousness, and find the source. Find are the stories true? Are the symbols meaningful? Are the metaphors or the maps, or are they useful? Are they just nice drawings that somebody did? And the only way you can know that is you follow the map and see where you end up. And I think that's the beauty of so much of the work, I guess, that Audley left in his legacy, is he left lots of maps, and he left lots of markers along the way, and lots of information about how to become aware of yourself, how to find that, how to know it. And if you just keep practicing, you may have it. But at the same time, that whole metaphor about keep practicing, it's almost as bad as get initiated. You know, it's like all of those reaffirm the sense of duality, that you're not there already, and that you need a map to get there, because it's wow, it must be a really long journey. I've been working on it for all of my life, and I still am working on it, and I'm still not satisfied or happy with what I've become aware of, or what I found within myself. But all those, it's, again, you look at everything, and each one of those feelings or those thoughts, those symbols that we identify with, those stories that we tell ourselves over and over, the lies that we may be telling ourselves. One of the lies is, I'm not the source. I'm not enlightened. I'm not one with all things. I've got that one down pretty solid. And I can prove it to you. I'll just run into the wall, and you'll see that I'm pretty gross physical in this world, and but it's stories that I'm really bought into, and it's very challenging to sit still, to let all of those images that rise in the mind, all of those thoughts, all of those feelings, all of those either sense images, auditory images, all of the sensory systems are tied to what it is. Even our sense, one of our senses is a sense of knowing where we are in space. It allows us to stand up, to walk around, to do all that. If that little part of the vestibular system in the brain gets messed up in any way, you simply can't make sense of where you are in space. And if you can't do that, you can't balance, you can't use the muscles properly. A lot of things go wrong in the brain, and you tend to fall down. And the people that there's about 20,000 people a year in the US that develop some symptom in that part of the brain. And they simply fall down all the time. And it's not so bad that they fall down, but they just keep falling. They have that sense of like you're in the dream and you're falling and you're just falling forever. That's simply a function of the mind and how it's wired, or the brain system. And it would be a good experience to learn to let go of what your thoughts are attached to. But very difficult things. But we can learn a lot by studying how the mind works and how we do it. And then there's lots of discussion in various circles about, do you need a guru or no guru? And and the true non-dualist say that you don't need gurus. What makes you think you need a guru? That's just somebody that's different from you, or that's it's outside of you. It's just like if you are looking for a guru, you've missed the whole thing. The source is within. It's not outside of you. And you can do heated discussions one way or the other, but then bottom line, does it help to have the model or the concept or the map that there's a guru that can help you? And so they say, yeah, even though it may be a little misleading, it's probably a good idea to mislead people in that way. It can motivate them and help them look within. And so even though there isn't anything other than you in the universe, having a map or having a symbol or having someone you revere as a teacher, again, it's your devotion and your desire to want to be a part of that really opens it up. And it, as the saying is in all the traditions, when the student is ready, the master appears, or the teacher appears. Well, when the student is ready is when your devotion turns to a point within you that you become, you have a desire to want to know the truth about life, the truth about what you are. It's not who you are, any of that, it's what you are. You're an expression of that divine. And when you touch that, even just a brief instant, or you taste it, just one taste of it, and everything in your life can be transformed, and you view it differently. And all of a sudden you don't have the fear of death. It's not like there's something here and it's going to end. It's like you are. So it can be good. It can be a problem, but either way, it's having the concept and having the devotion is a useful tool that I found helps me a great deal. But I have also met a number of beings that through no fault of their own had no guru or no teacher, yet they have had an awakening or an enlightenment and awareness that comes into them that's the same as all those that touch the source. And so it depends on what works best for you and how you focus. And it's the same with the path and the journey. If there's a path, then there's something that you have to be doing to get there. Well, you are the source. That's the given. And there's no path that you can take to get there. There is no journey. It's not hard work. It's just changing the thought in the mind. It's what you identify with. We tend to identify with physical bodies, and when we identify with physical bodies, we have the concept in the mind that the way to get from one place to another is we follow a path, or we walk, or we get in our car, or we drive, or we do our skateboard, or we ride the bicycle, we do whatever, but we have to move from here to there. Well, that's the state of duality. There's a here and there. And when you really get into the source, there's no here and there's no there. It's just being, it's existence, it's what you are. And so again, the concepts or the metaphor or the map of it being a path and a journey can be very useful tools to help motivate you and get you started in the right direction. But if you like the path and that model so much, you may just stay on the path, and you may have self-talk that, I've been practicing for 10 years or 50 years or 100 years or 300,000 lifetimes, and I'm still working on it. I haven't got there yet. Well, as long as you feel you need to practice, or there's something that you need to do, then you don't have that awareness. the real trick is what the meditations all teach is when you become still and calm the mind and still the mind, then you come to a knowing or a knowledge, an awareness of what you really are, of the fact that there is no path, there is no journey. And then sense perception, we've talked about that in a lot of the talks that I've done, and mistakes and deceptions. And there's a lot of things we can do to actually trick the brain. You know, there's a lot of brain hacks that are quite fun to play with. And I encourage people to study as much neuroscience as you can and learn how the mind and the brain works. And then there's a neuroscientist at the University of San Diego, V.S. Ramachandran, and he's done a lot of work with the concept called mirror neurons, and they're neurons that are parts of our brain that help us to be empathetic with others. Like we can, when someone tells an experience and those neurons fire and we get in sync, we maybe are breathing together, we may be moving our hands together, we may be taking a sip of water at the same time, but we're connected in some way. But they found that, and he does a lot of very clever experiments that he found that people that amputees often have a challenge with, they'll get an itch in the arm that's been amputated or been removed, or that they were no longer have with them. And he found that it's simply, there's nothing they can do to scratch that feeling, because it feels like, you know, my right hand is itching and it's in pain because it was smashed, and that's why they removed it. But I can't relieve that itch in any way. And he actually began to look at how the mind maps things like that, and found that the map has just been taken over by somewhere else. And he can take you know, images of people, and you can quickly remap the brain into the hand of a rubber hand. You can do a lot of things that trick the brain. And one of the experiments that we showed in a very early video, the one that's the basketball pass, where there's 3 people in red shirts, 3 people in white shirts, and each group has a basketball and they're passing it among themselves. And the instruction is given to count the number of passes that the people in the white shirts make, and people will concentrate on that. And then in the midst of it, they have a person in a gorilla suit come in, walk around in the center of the circle, throw their arms up, make some noise and do things, and then walk out. And but the people that were concentrating really well on counting the number of ball passes, they missed the gorilla completely. That's just a function of how our mind works. And the mind can generally do one thing. Attention or awareness can be applied to one thing at a time. And so as you find these things out about your mind, you can understand what goes on in meditation much better. Whatever you focus the mind on is what you become aware of and what you see. And you can have brain maps or illusions. You can map your brain into a new car. This is some of the things, as I learned more about this and studying more neuroscience, I found that I can go get a rental car and I get in it, and you know, I look in the mirrors, I set it up, and somehow or another my mind and my brain immediately map to the dimensions of the new vehicle. And I can pull up next to a curb and I know I'm like 2 inches away. Or I can pull up next to a car and I don't run into it. I'm a few inches away, but I have a pretty good sense for where the edges of the car are, just like the edges of my body. And you can play around with this, and you can map yourself into another person's body. You can map yourself into inanimate objects, all kinds of things, and you can experience what those objects, what that perception is. And so neuroscience is a good way to explore yourself. And then also a lot of the issues, what I've seen increasingly over time, is that the people have the pathologies associated with the flow of energy in the various centers, you know, like they're fearful, or they feel guilt, or they feel remorse. And meditation can work on some of those things, but it can be quite challenging to change some of those things without a very skilled teacher that knows the correct remediations to have you practice to do certain things. And often I found that if people simply go into a monastery or go into a secluded place where they can practice in great depth and not be distracted a lot, they can make better progress with the meditative techniques alone. But if they have the issues of fear, shame, guilt, even attachment to the incorrect things, it can be very challenging. And so therapy can help. Some of those we just, as easily as we can map our brain into the rental car that we're driving so that we don't run into things, and we know where the edges of the car are so we don't hurt it or hurt ourselves. We can do it. And a lot of these, the thing I struggle with in trying to teach is to find demonstrations that that can show a lot of these things. And I found it's a little more challenging to come up with demonstrations when you're on a Zoom session. It's just simply easier in person to show people how easily their mind is affected and deceived. And if you map a few people into a rubber hand or various things, they get the concept very quickly. So I would encourage demonstrations. And if you know of any that you found very useful in your own awareness, please send me a note or help me to understand what some of those are. And then the other thing with initiations, I've come also to increasingly see that initiations happen at each chakra, each level in the awareness. And it depends on where you are is kind of the effect when a teacher imparts energy or shares a part of his consciousness. Different students perceive it in different ways. And a lot of it has to do with their devotion and their level or their center of gravity, the level that they're expressing from, whether it's mental, heart, emotional, devotional, third eye, more mental in that expression. Each will have a different way. And then the ideal is, as you move through the levels, there are multiple levels of initiation. And that's why studying with a teacher and practicing meditation over time, often they'll have you go back through the initiations, and it's kind of like getting your wedding vows renewed or reinforcing or helping you to understand what's happening at the various levels. But as you practice with time and as you still the mind, and you can say stilling the mind is purifying consciousness in a sense, that's correct, but it's not like it's dirty. It's more like, you were just working on the car and you got, oil and grease all over your hands, and now all you need to do is go wash them. So it's not that something's wrong with you. It's like you may have picked up some energy around you, and that can be removed, can be taken off, can be washed away very easily. And a lot of the symbols that are used in initiation are often symbols that help us to understand that we're changing to a new. Like in the Christian tradition, we're born of water when we first come into the world, and so they use the symbol of going into the stream or the river or the ocean and being born of water again, being taken below the water and then bringing back into the light. And so where you were born of water initially, now you're being born of light. And sometimes the symbol that's used to reflect that is like a pure white dove. We have these things built into our consciousness that if they're white things, they must be pure and whole. And if they're, and if it's a raven or a crow, you have to be, somehow or another, we've got all this baked into our society and our culture and our language. And so it really has to do, all crows and all ravens have the divine light in them, just like all doves and white people and all sorts of other things. So it helps to have an understanding. In the initiation, the symbol is used sometimes to show the spirit is coming. to show that you've been born into a new life, into a new awareness. And so often there's a ceremony that's tied to it that may help you to see deeper into your own being. And then with the initiation, it comes, it's pointless to give initiations if people don't have the correct knowledge, the techniques, the seeds have been planted, the proper environment, the soil, the dedication, discipline, devotion, discrimination, the correct practice. You prepare the mind, the heart, and the soul. And if preparations are made and practice is done, then the initiation can be very profound. And it can really be a moment of transition to where you truly see from one world, from the gross world into the subtle world, or from the gross and the subtle world into the causal world. You can see or experience that divine oneness, that light, that radiant light, that love, that feeling of bliss, all of those things. But all of those are part of the model or the method, the process of initiation. And then with enlightenment, it's again, I mean, there's a lot of metaphors that have been used over time. It's like lost, now you're found. You've been saved, as they taught me in the Baptist church when I was growing up. And maybe you were dirty versus clean. You were really dirty, and you were born again. You were born anew, and so now that you're clean and you're pure versus impure, and pure in the sense of being one with the divine and expressing what the divine does, expressing love and kindness and generosity and joyfulness for all beings. And some people describe blind versus seeing. Like been blind all my life, and all of a sudden I wake up and I'm seeing the truth. I'm seeing the light. And maybe the same with the hearing. I know there's a lot of work that's been done from some of the neuroscientists I know to design cochlear implants, and people that have never heard before, they can actually build an electronic ear and implant it in the brain in a way that the person can now hear and see. And they're always, the expression they show on their face when they hear for the first time is really quite amazing. And then there's also the concept of, is it instantaneous enlightenment or ongoing? And if it's instantaneous, if you touch it just once and taste it, does it last forever? Or is it something that is an expanding and developing of awareness? And those are great topics to spend time thinking about and experimenting with. And then the path, the journey, and the destination, all those things. In a true sense, there's no path, there's no journey, there's no destination. All you have to do is stop thinking that there is, and still the mind completely, and it's there. And whether or not you still the mind and there's a teacher or a guru, or that's part of the story or the awareness that you have, or whether or not, if you still the mind and you go for a walk in nature and you're touched by that presence of oneness that's within all things, it's just like, however you experience, it's all the same. And then the whole concept between hard work or lazy woman, lazy man, it's just like, there's some people that seem to not do much work at all, and they get there, they find enlightenment, they find awareness in the same way, and others work very hard. You can see quickly that it's more of the belief that the being has about what the path is or how they perceive it, whether or not it's hard work, a long journey, takes many lifetimes, or it's something that's quick and easy. So you have to look at it yourself. And then what keeps you from enlightenment? Incorrect information. You're assuming right now that you're not enlightened in most cases, and that there's no path, there's no journey, there's no destination, there's no guru. Even some people say, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. It's not the true guru, it's not the true Buddha. And so that ignorance is what can keep you from it. And then correct knowledge, you may have the right knowledge, but you do little or no practice. You think, it's just like me. Sometimes I think if I buy a book and put it on the shelf, I'll know everything that's in it. Well, I've got, a lot of books that I put on the shelf, and they do look good. They smell good. I like the feel of the paper and all that, but some of them I never get around to reading. And so as a result, I may have the correct knowledge and even the correct path in that book, but if I don't read it and practice or do something with that knowledge, it's pointless. And then you can have the correct information, but too much egoism, attachment to false gods or false ideas. You think you say, oh no, it couldn't be that. I tried all that stuff. I heard about that once. Been there, done that. That's not the truth. That's not the path. All that. It's thinking that and that's the true challenge. A lot of times, if you meet a teacher or guru, is you think and you think the information in the right way and how it should be done, and so if you filled with egoism, you think everything the teacher says is wrong, or maybe at first it sounded pretty good, and then you start seeing that, well, he's not a perfect master. He's just a master. He can do some pretty cool things, but it's no big deal. There's even magicians can do pretty cool things. I saw them on American Idol. They were even fooling old Simon. But the ego can think it knows more than the teacher. But in some cases it may. As I've talked about, just because a guru or a great teacher is enlightened, that doesn't mean they're an expert in calculus or quantum mechanics or that they can speak all languages. It's like if they want to learn a new language, they start just like you and me. They start with the basics. They learn the sounds. They learn how to map the brain in a certain way to get the language. So just knowing that source doesn't make you knowledgeable of everything. However, if you do know that source and you can go into it with a focused mind and let go into that oneness, anything that you take in the mind going into that, you can find information about it, no matter what the subject, but it still doesn't come, fully baked. You have to utilize the calculus. You have to learn the rules. You have to apply it. You have to find out how the correct way to apply it. And then you can do something useful with the calculations. But we all have a part of what we're trying to do. And then with the meditation leading to enlightenment, often in Kriya Yoga tradition, and in Dr. Thin's Radiant Road to Reality, he talks about superconscious meditation often. And superconscious meditation is taking consciousness to a level so that you identify with the source of consciousness, that you become one with that awareness. And in Kriya, it's like what Master Babaji said, when he started, reviving this knowledge, was it's liberation in this lifetime. It's not, it's, like there's the old way, it's the hard path that takes 100,000 lifetimes and lots of practice, slaving away and carrying giant boulders up the mountain over and over. But it's something that can be done in this lifetime, and you simply can accelerate it. And again, they talk about it being a scientific process. You learn this breathing technique, this pranayama, you learn this mantra, you do this over and over, and all of a sudden things begin to change very quickly. And often in just 2 or 3 years, you see remarkable changes. And so you want to know, how much is it the guru versus the technique? Well, if it's the technique is good, the knowledge is correct, then it's probably more the technique. I know Audley said a lot of times it's the guru can provide the instruction, and that in a sense is the grace of the divine showing the way. But as the guru doesn't save or doesn't initiate into enlightenment, the guru opens doors and provides that minimal chance that we may need to see beyond the attachments that we have in our own mind. And so he said, the guru's about 10%. On a good day, maybe a little more. Sometimes they can really wow you and do some quite amazing things. And then the rest of it's up to you. It's your devotion, your practice, your you're utilizing the knowledge in the awareness. And the true grace is that there is knowledge and awareness, that there's a technique that's been given, that there's an example, someone that has touched that source and shares it. You can see it in their words and in their actions. So that's the true grace. And then it really comes down, the question that we're wrestling with is, what are you? And it's not who are you, but it's what are you? You want to identify with that source. And there's a lot of things that, are kind of strange quotes I get from people from time to time. But one time, one of the students of Audley's said, people from Oklahoma don't stand a chance when it comes to enlightenment. It's too dark a place. And I couldn't help but smile and think, here's the most brilliant being that I've ever come across in this lifetime is sitting there in front of me, and someone saying, it's too dark here. So it's all in how we see it. And then people in California, their biggest problem is they think they're in California. And you can get lost there real easy. Californians have a lot of strange ideas. And then there's a concept running around that you have to be born on Tuesday to attain enlightenment. And while you're quickly looking at your calendar to see what day you were born on, you can figure out real quick if you've got a chance. Well, fortunately, that one's kind of bogus. But when I hear something like that, I just simply go along and talk to anybody I think that's even sort of enlightened and say, by the way, what day were you born on? And find they were born on every day of the week. It doesn't seem like there's a special day. And then if you could carry enlightenment in your pocket, where would you go? That's another one you could ponder that one for quite a while. And then there's also a story that if you're bitten by a snake in your dream, you will attain enlightenment in this lifetime. That's a symbol that's often used. And after I heard that story, and I went home that night, and Audley used to have this little slant board that he had trouble with his back, so he laid on that slant board, and it would relieve the pain on its back, kind of like inversion boots that we have today, and make it a little easier. But he'd had some trouble. It had broken in a way, and he wanted to know if I could fix it. And so I took all the stuff over to my place and got it all fixed up, and I set it outside the apartment that I was living in a protected area. I knew no one was going to take an old slant board, and I set it outside the door, and I went to sleep, and I was going to take it over to his place the next morning. And in my dream, I woke up and I heard some commotion outside, and I thought about the slant board, and there's a problem, and so I jumped up, but I was out of my body, and ran out there, and sure enough, there was the slant board, and it was a lot of light was around it. It's like somebody had turned on the light in kind of this dark area. And I looked at it, and right on the top of the slant board, there was a small snake. And I put my hand up because it startled me. And when I did, it bit me right in the palm of the hand. And I thought, my God, that must be a good omen. And I woke up, and my hand was still hurting even the next day. And I went and saw Audley and took him back to slant board. And he said, well, that was a really good dream. He says, maybe you've got a chance this lifetime after all. But anyway, and then in the end, you may have, you may be sitting there thinking, oh, I should have taken the red pill. And for those of you who don't know about the red pill and the blue pill, the red pill and the blue pill refer to a scene in the movie series, The Matrix. And taking the red pill, you get the willingness, you get to choose between the willingness to learn potentially unsettling or life-changing truth that you're plugged into the matrix. And you take the red pill, and you have a chance for that. Or you can remain content in your ignorance and take the blue pill, and you'll just go back to sleep, and you'll enjoy your dream. So, and then that brings us back to, to one of our familiar faces, and a picture of the old guy and in the center. I think that's probably a good place to stop. Maybe we can take a short break, and um, then we can have questions and answers if that works for everybody. Oh, oh, okay. Uh, it's a question about Roy Davis and Kriya techniques and Audley. Uh, and
Can
my
you read it? Because
experience.
people can't see it on the recording. So if you could just read the question before
Ah,
you answer it so people can hear it.
okay, let me see if I can find it again.
I've got it. I've got it. Ben,
Here.
since you knew Roy Eugene Davis and his Kriya techniques, how do they compare to Audley's in trying to achieve enlightenment?
Okay, that's very good question, and one that has come up many times. And uh, the thing that amazed me most is that the traditions, like Audley, was exposed to multiple traditions, and he studied quite a lot with a gentleman there in Oklahoma City named Paul Mackey, and I think there's even some of the lecture tapes that he had, and then he met Dr. Thin, who was really his guru or awakener, his root teacher. And then after Dr. Thin passed away, he met lots of other teachers, but one of them that came in the next uh, couple of years after Dr. Thin had passed away was Roy Eugene Davis. And the techniques that are taught, actually the meditation techniques are taught by both Audley and Dr. Thin. They both have the techniques of listening to the sound and focusing on the inner lights. The teachings in terms of uh, duality versus non-duality, or more of the philosophical or metaphysical background behind it. Those are very similar. I think Roy, and clearly with time and in his studying of the materials and stuff, he came to more, I would say, more solid non-dual expression of it. Audley talked about the non-dual aspect and components, but also a lot of the traditions he was more strongly tied to, like shown in the image, the Christian traditions, and and his love and devotion in that. It's a little bit different on a philosophical basis, but when you get down to the techniques that were taught, they're all very similar. For me, I see them as identical. And they all work. And the addition that when Roy added the the Kriya technique, or the Kriya pranayam, that was primarily what was given by Babaji and handed down through the traditions, through the lineage, and that technique was very powerful. And as soon as Audley learned that, he utilized it and immediately knew the source of it and went directly to Babaji in that sense. And that's where his devotion really was, in that sense. And he was gifted in the sense that he could see and interact with beings in that level. Um, and I've shared some stories with Roy. He tend to downplay that, but clearly in his presence, it's just like whatever he was devoted to, I would see it manifest around him, or as he was doing initiations, always see the presence of those of Babaji and the teachers in that lineage. And that's where his devotion was so strong. And oddly, when he did those techniques and those teachings, those initiations, he did the same. And he shared it. Oddly, I would say, because he had more of an energetic awareness, the subtle sight, the psychic awareness, the psychic sight, he was able to do things with students that I did not see and have not seen any other teacher do. There's a few around. I haven't. I guess I've met some of them. I have not worked with them as they're working with someone to be able to witness how they utilize energy. But Audley was able to heal and repair chakras and doing things like that. A lot of teachers tend to stay away from that, either because they don't know how to do it, or they don't know that awareness. They don't know that particular technique of energy, but as they utilize that, they gain, in a greater appreciation for it. So I see the teachings that they both shared very similar, in many cases the same basic teaching, the same basic enlightenment, the same basic oneness, the same great supreme, the same oversoul, the same God self, all is that radiant light. And but they each expressed it through their personality and their awareness and their experience, and kind of like I do, or like any of you that are teaching would do the same. Does that help in any way? Any other questions?
Yeah, Ben, I had one.
Okay.
I remember one time at the Lotus Center, someone asked Audley a question. This person had had a fourth initiation maybe a couple of months before, and we were talking about fourth initiations, and he asked Audley if he could do his over again because he didn't feel like it took or had an effect or whatever. And I remember Audley just laughing and saying, and kind of dismissed it and just said, no, you just need to meditate more.
Yeah.
But I also remember Audley talking about there are numerous initiations on numerous levels at different times that just happen when you're ready. And
Right.
that is it possible in your experience that people do have initiations that they're not aware of, and that it does take some time to come to fruition?
Yeah. Very, very good question. And yeah, I see that often. In fact, I've had an opportunity in the last 3 or 4 years to engage in some of the lectures and meet a number of the students that were small children when Audley was still alive. And he often did blessings for the children. And and it looked like, if you see the pictures, and there's a lot of the parents, we were all proud parents, so we had our pictures, took pictures of him blessing or placing his hands on their head, or treating them in different ways and doing things with them. And and then a lot of them I hadn't seen for 30 years, and they're all grown up, and they're acting like adults now, and still remembering Audley and thinking about it. And that's one of the first questions is, well, since I didn't get initiated by Audley, do I have a chance for enlightenment in this lifetime? And I have to do like Audley, to kind of chuckle, and because if I look in their head, if he touched them or was aware of them, or even if he never saw them and they have a great devotion to him, that light manifests in their own being and in their head. And if they have devotion to him as a teacher, whether or not they were in his presence, if they knew someone who knew him, or heard about someone who knew him and heard about the teaching, and they thought, boy, if I had that, it tends to activate that awareness within. And that's where the difference is. It's like, I think people in general would like to say, well, I go to the initiation, and it's it's like the baptism. When I was baptized in the church, they took me to the farm pond, and they put me under the water, and they came out and said, you're new. Well, they want to be new and different, and see, it would be great if the heavens opened and the doves came down and the angels were all around you. And a few people have that kind of experience, but most of them, it's a much more subtle awareness. And it's not like you can, it's part of the whole issue with the illusion of there needs to be an initiation or needs to be a teacher and a guru, is that it only creates a separation when you think about that hardly, in I guess in difficult or precise terms. You take it to the limit, and you say, well, the fact that he touched someone at one point, that's all that's needed. It's not like you can initiate them more, but it's just like sometimes it helps the spirit Just like I have a lot of friends who are married and they renew their wedding vows from time to time because it helps them to remember what it is that their love and devotion for each other is. And so it reinforces that experience of their love and their life. And so I think, the fact that a lot of times Audley would, take a new group of students through an initiation, and then he would either he would, go back to all of his old students and run the energy and kind of tweak them up a little bit, you know, clear out blockages or help them to have a more clear perception. Um, and sometimes it happens. But again, to his point, if you don't practice, and you don't learn to at least master the functioning of the mind, there's not much, it's not going to just happen to you as a rule if you're not, devoted and loving and trying to move in that direction. Does that add enough clarity to it, or do you want to ask more?
I guess you didn't hear me, but I said that was good. I appreciate it.
Okay.
Ben, I'll read
Yeah.
Petros's comment. He said, "Thank you, Ben. It seems Audley took it farther than Roy in terms of step-by-step methods to explore the kingdom. Another difference I spotted was Roy's focus on the third eye as center of techniques, while Audley seemed to avoid it. True?"
Yeah, I mean, I see what you're saying, and I understand it. I probably would not put it in that. I mean, they clearly expressed they were much different personality and much different mental processing. And the biggest thing is, Roy, I think, tended to downplay. He saw the challenges that people often get into if they open the subtle sight and have experiences in those levels and get involved in past lifetimes and all the subtle realm experiences. It's easy to get lost, and I think he dealt with a lot of students over time that were very lost, and he focused his teaching much more on trying to just center and balance and find the wholeness or the oneness within themselves. And I think that's is very useful. Having taught more in small groups and stuff over a long period of time, I find that tends to be good, solid advice. If people get too involved in the subtle, especially astral world and etheric realms and those levels, they can be so encapsulating or so complete in what they are that you think you've found enlightenment just because you found bright shiny things. It's like running along the beach and finding diamonds or gold coins. You could, if it happens regularly, before long that's what you're spending all of your time doing, and collecting things that add to the fallacy. So I'd say, yeah, very definite differences. I wouldn't, from my experience, I wouldn't describe it in the way that Petros is described in the question, but yeah, very much different in that, and from a different time and a different perspective, and I think the advantage, and as Roy lived older, he was able to add some refinement to his teaching and his writing that were, I found, very helpful and very useful. And and I think Audley, he went before he was before he wanted to. He was having a great deal of fun with all of us, and enjoyed it a great deal. And he was so fluid and so aware in all of the levels. Like he talked about the freeman of the whole estate. He could. I never saw any level that he went into that he wasn't the master of. When his awakening was very comprehensive and very complete. And even if it was a level he had never been in before and dealing with things that he didn't know. He would just surrender to the divine part of himself, and that knowledge would flow through, and he would know what to do in that situation. So truly a remarkable being, and what he could do. I think he had healing abilities that he often downplayed. And he had all these machines in his meditation room that a lot of times people would come and he would work on them with the machines or various things. But I came to see in time that most of the machines were a distraction to focus their attention while he was doing something energetically. And he was truly a gifted healer, and gave unbelievable amounts of his time and energy and effort to make it all aware and make it possible for us. Anything else?
Hey, Ben,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask you, so you go back to this all one, all being right now, right here, and everything collapses into that sort of, right?
Yeah.
So how can we remind ourselves of that? How can we, our story of our experience with Audley, and how can we bring that into, I'd just like to know if you could just give me one little thing that'll help us just move right into that all one, all, you know what I mean? All now. Thank you. Just thank you for this class too.
Oh, well, thank you. But yeah, the way to do it, I mean, that's what we all struggle with and all wrestle with. I mean, we'd like to have as much of that awareness of what we are as possible, as quickly as, instantly, and it never go away, and I'd never come back and identify with my body, in total. And the one thing to do, I mean, it's the experiences that you've had or that you've heard about him. The best thing is to build your devotion to that as strong as possible. And that's why I encourage people. I try to share experiences that I've had with Audley, and how I remember him, and how I remember his teaching, how I remember his you might say miracles, or his working in energy, how he helped me. Writing that down, communicating that to others, holding that in your own awareness, however you best remember it, whatever the interaction was, either the interaction in person, interaction in what you heard about him, interactions in what you know about him. Learn everything that you can about that teaching and why he did it. Why was he, why was he out there talking to a bunch of, I mean, we were truly a ragtag, bunch of hippies, most of us long hair, most of the people pretty well gone in the early days, into different lifestyles and different choices and things. But, he felt a great need to share and to provide information. And so the information, it's what you carry in your heart and your devotion that's the key to the whole thing. And if you want to do any one single thing, is build a devotion. And as you do that, as you think about him and think about what he taught you personally, or what he taught your family or your friends or those that heard about what did he say, and apply it. It's just like go back through the little cards and start looking at your mind and seeing how it works, and what comes to mind when you see a picture of him. Focus on that image. All those things that they build devotion, and that devotion opens the doorway for you to know that part of yourself. And that's the simple way, even for us lazy guys. Is that clear enough, or
Ben? Hello, Ben?
Yes.
I think you're absolutely correct about the cards, because I think you could go through them quite often to find things out about yourself.
Yeah. No, they're really that. And can they be improved? I mean, like there's some of the students that I've been working with, and I look at it and look at like the little meditation book and all that, and it's really quite dated. It still has God the Father, and it doesn't. It never talks about the female component in a true sense, and even the wording of the cards. They're very much like. The 12-step program in AA in some ways. I mean, they're all similar and come out of that time, but I think they could be refined and improved. And if people apply them, and then try to share them with someone, and they'll say, "Well, I don't understand this," and then you say, "Well, maybe if we talked about it like this, or we could go through it together, or what did you find in your mind?" I think that's where the small group activity, where a few people get together and simply agree to read through the little book, and to write a better one. It was truly sophomoric, or maybe not even more of a freshman's effort to write down some of the things that he taught. And even since I was involved in a lot of that process, I can tell you, even he was not too happy with the book. He immediately began to give me a whole list of things that we left out, of the ones of us that had worked on it, and it was clear, there were 3 or 4 of us standing there, and everybody looked downhearted or dejected in some way, because it was like the best that we could come up with, and we thought it was pretty good. And here the teacher says, this is okay, but it's kind of crappy. It could be really improved, and it could be made better. And so I sense that's what the whole thing about validating the path. And if you don't apply it to your own life, and then document it in some way, it's just like some people are artists, they paint a picture of it, or like Audley was a stone carver, and he could put words on stone that last a long time, and he could do images that were inspiring and uplifting. He was not as good at writing prose, and writing novels and writing stories and that, but he expressed through his own talents, and some of the most creative and amazing expression that exists. He's got images of things that from the inner worlds that I haven't seen anybody even get close to. And one of the things I've noticed about his images and his clarity is he could go in and look at them, and he would bring back the most essential parts. And when I see other people go in and try to do it, a lot of times, and it's a stage in development and in awareness, but if they do the same drawing even as what he did, it'll have a whole lot more detail in it. It's just like they're clearly seeing it and unfolding it, but it's a real art to be able to know how much is enough detail so that it keeps people going in the proper direction, but it's not a map that's so detailed that you get them lost out in the forest. It doesn't become overwhelming, and that's a real art and a challenge. And he was extremely good at being able to pull out the essential information that you needed, and just give you a few cards to work on, or a few sentences in affirmation form to go back over, or a few images that could help you if you're lost and can't find your way, and you see something that's even remotely close to it, and you think, "Oh my God, I remember." And that's the beauty of his teaching. Does that make sense?
Are sets of those cards still available?
Oh yeah. It's if anybody doesn't have them, we can send me a text message or an email or something, and I'll send them to you. I've got them in all kinds of formats.
He added a 12th card that was not in the book.
Yeah, well, some places it talks about 11 cards, and in some it's 12. So, you know, he was constantly making things better and trying to improve them. And I think that's, you know, that's how you make it your own. That's how you, if you want to, you know, experience the oneness, the only way you do it is sit still. Remember the source. Remember the guru. You know, whatever builds your devotion to it. And there are several texts, you know, that are probably better. Like in Kriya Yoga tradition, there were 3 primary root texts that Yukteswar gave Yogananda and said, you know, you should, you know, teach from these. And that was the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras, and the Upanishads. And there's 13 major Upanishads. There's you know, excellent texts, excellent translations on a lot of these things that are much better today than anything you could find in those. But if you want to simply do something to help your, you know, improve your chances, or to help change the I guess false ideas that you're attached to, it's like reading those texts a little bit each day. And Yogananda, you know, had people read 2 or 3 verses of the Bhagavad Gita every day in their morning practice. And I've experienced that with the Center for Spiritual Enlightenment. And I think Roy did it at Center for Spiritual Awareness out in Georgia. But it's just a meditation technique and a contemplation. But you read a few of the verses, and then you meditate and contemplate on the meaning of those. And it takes you about a year to go through the Bhagavad Gita, reading 2 or 3 verses, and they kind of match them up with the context, that, you know, if it doesn't split a thing, but it gives you a good basis. The Upanishads, Eknath Easwaran from the, I think, Blue Mountain Institute in Berkeley, he did, you know, probably the best translations I've ever seen. They just make beautiful stories, and he's got a version of the Bhagavad Gita that's the same, you know. And I'd encourage people to read there. And if you, you know, I've considered even doing a small online group where we just, you know, have a short meditation and a contemplation, and read a few verses of the scripture and do some mantra every day. You know, people are interested in that. You know, it's something I'm exploring now, and I'll either do it or find someone to help me, and we'll make sure that's available, so people have more resources to build community.
I'll ask something if nobody else has something. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, it's Catherine or Katie. I had a wonderful experience with Audley in a dream. It was so funny. I don't know whether it just was, anyway, at any rate, perhaps it has something to do with your discussion about going to lectures inside in your dream.
Mm-hmm.
But I had that same kind of dream, and it was kind of uncanny, because it was like either your birthday or the day after. And I thought, well, I wonder if Ben had some connection here to this. But at any rate, he was there lecturing this huge group of people. And it was very identifiable. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind that that was who he was. And yet, in terms of it was not like his old personality that was very happy and bubbly in the dream. Maybe it's because of what I needed. He was very impersonal, very impersonal. And, but what was so cool was, I mean, it kind of demonstrates your discussion about how he could give just what was needed. It was very pithy, very direct. He just took my personal daily meditation, which is a lot, a majority of it is just my Bhagavad walking. Yeah. He took it and he gave me a mantra to put with it.
Yeah.
That was it. That was the whole That was the teaching to me. That was
Yeah.
it. It was like, wow, that is so awesome.
Thank you for sharing it. That's the kind of experiences that he's known for, and truly, I would say as I interact with him in a way, but it's not the personality that, we would know as Audley so much. It's sort of like it, but not, I can see that expression and that awareness and that, but it's more of the fullness of his being. And he can be, just like you described there, he can be pithy or pointed to the, nail it like with one or two words sometimes. It's just like he can penetrate the heart or, but it's your devotion that opens that up, that awareness. And if he gave you that, I mean, that mantra like that, those are power mantras and secret mantras. Those are the ones that you for me, they're not the spoken mantra. It's the
Right.
one that's the inner mantra.
It would never have predicted what he gave me or that it would work, or, my mind, my intellectual mind would just say, that's just kind of silly. But when I did it, it's really amazing and powerful. It's not silly at all.
Yeah. Well, that's why I just say, validate it for yourself, test it. And in my experience with him, he gives me some, over time, some fairly silly things, but, they have an amazing, I guess, efficiency in how they work.
Mm-hmm.
And back to, I think it was John's question, the one thing you can do, I mean, this is a good example. It's that devotion in your heart. It'll open all kinds of stuff. And, some of the mantra techniques that can be used, they're very powerful to help stimulate and open that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if there's no other questions, I think we've gone over the time, and we didn't even get to take a break. If anybody needs one, you can take it now. But I thank you again for sharing this time with me, and for making it possible, and especially to Connie for setting these things up and recording them and getting them posted at various places online, and do things like that. And if you have questions, you can send me an email or give me a call or a text, or anymore. It's probably best if you have text me and find out if it's a good time to call, or text me and say, I sent you an email, can you read it? Because I tend not to be as active in that in some ways. If there's no other questions or no other comments, we'll call it a day, and I'll just say thank you, and I appreciate everybody being there.
Thank you.
Thank you.